Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and today I want to just give a bit of a look into the newest character I'm making, which is supposed to be CoC DP, or Cast on Crit Dark Pact. So lots of people have already made Dark Pact builds, and people keep telling me, play Dark Pact, it's pretty overpowered, Berserker's amazing and all that. And I'm not really too big a fan of the absolute cheesiness that Berserker is. Sometimes when it feels right, I will do it, but this time around I'm trying to give Dark Pact just a bit of a different spin or edge to it, and that is to be an Occultist and then also cast on crit. So as you can see here, this is the cast on crit Cyclone triggering Dark Pact, and it is a crit based build. It is an Occultist rather than a Berserker, as most people have been doing. It's not necessarily a better choice, but it is just a different choice. And at this point, it's working out pretty well. These are the first few maps this character is doing after being leveled, and overall it looks like it should become a rather decent map clearer, something pretty fun and effective, while not necessarily being the greatest world beater or overall game clearer. And that is largely because cast on crit is still kind of shit at the moment, with its 0.5 second cooldown, and you can see it really starts to lag behind on the single target damage. So self-cast DP just ends up doing a lot more damage in the single target sense, whereas this build really starts to shine when there's a lot of monsters around. For example, this double Beyond Pit here, where things just keep spawning and keep dying because we're constantly stun immune on the move with our Cyclone and doing some pretty good clear with the Dark Pact crits. So it is effective enough for clearing. It probably won't be the best thing ever for single target, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe it will still be adequate in the end. If it's not, I will have to transfer to a bit of self-cast action as well, though still being an Occultist and still being crit based, so it's still a little bit of something different. Overall, cast on crit can only get about 2 casts in per second at the moment, thanks to the cooldown, though with the new belt, untethered, whatever it is, it does work for reducing the cast on crit cooldown by about 20%, meaning you should be able to get 2.5 casts in per second, which is a pretty big buff if you're constantly making use of the cooldown of cast on crit. So it is something that I may look into this build for sure if it feels right, and if I can justify a slot for it, I will very likely do it. But at this stage, going to try and live without it because I do really want as much life as possible on this build. Going to try and get something like, 6k or so, and feel decent about mapping. So at this point you can see we have Atziri Flask as well as Warlord's Mark giving us our Sustain and Leech, as opposed to the Berserker class, which just gets it by being a Berserker, whereas the Occultist, however, gets an additional curse happening, which, yeah, I guess kind of is what a Berserker would be anyway, because that's Warlord's Mark, and then also gets a bit of extra power charge on crit, another power charge, and some minus chaos. So all in all, it's somewhat comparative to a Berserker, just a bit weaker. So the character is still very much in its early phases at this point, and there's going to be a lot to figure out as far as gear choices, passive choices, and setups overall for gems. But at the moment, level 74 Occultist, something like 4k life, and running a Covenant chest. So the benefit of this is you don't really have to worry about mana cost for your Cyclone or your Dark Pact if you're just self-casting, and then you also get the level 15 added Chaos Gem, which is pretty close to a level 20, maybe half as effective, but it is still a lot of extra damage, thus giving you sort of a pseudo 5, 6, 7th link sort of thing. And the current setup is cast on crit, Cyclone into Dark Pact, and then running crit strikes, void manipulation, and conk effect over crit strikes whenever need be. There's not really going to be too much else I'm going to mention about the character because there's still a lot to figure out for me, or decide on. But at this point, I am using a Vegan dagger, which I've multi-modded for our dagger of choice to proc things with. Some crit is pretty important on your dagger for cast on crit sort of stuff. You could just run a Lycosidae instead and then have a really nice cast on crit dagger as well instead of a Vegan dagger, but this is how I have chosen to do it for now. Like I said, Atziri Flask, that gives us 2% Chaos Leech, which is pretty good, and of course running Blasphemy Warlords, and then Blasphemy Assassin's Mark at the moment, and Herald of Ice for the shatters and extra cold damage. Just basically freezing a little bit too. It's mostly there for the shatters though. So at this stage you can see about 6k average, bunch of chaos damage, a little bit of cold, and Always, as always, have a wither totem for our single target setup, and still a bunch of other stuff to figure out. Probably Vile Summon Skeletons helps with the single target just a bit for the Dark Pact that chains off of your skeletons. Now currently for the Occultist shit, we are going +1 power charge, and then the cast on, or the power charge on crit there, the minus chaos res, which is just straight up damage multiplier. Profane Bloom, not really too noticeable, doesn't do too much except for a bit of extra damage. And then Malediction I will be grabbing for the additional curse. Might be able to fit Poacher's Mark in, not too sure how I'll do that yet. And then there's the passive tree just going around doing area, spell damage, all sorts of junk, and then some Vile Pact. Now lastly, as a quick little preview, I will show you the path of building here, saying on average we hit for about 200k with the whole 6-link setup. And that is going to be skill cooldown 0.5, meaning you can get 2 of these crits in per second. So let's just say 400,000 DPS roughly. Whereas if we take out our cast on crit and our cyclone and put in a spell echo, for example, and then even something like the CoC, all of a sudden we have 860,000 DPS, which is scalable higher with cast speed like Vile Haste and a bunch of other shit. So ultimately, it doesn't look like Cast on Crit's going to compete at all for single target, and I may have to have another chest on standby if I want to do Cast on Crit still permanently. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, I think, and sort of reminiscent of the days of how Fakener used to perform with the sort of shield charging whirling, and then a bit of a spin exploding the entire screen. So that's the idea behind the character, guys. I can give you a little path of building if you want to play around with it as well. But for now, I'd say that's all. We'll see how this character unfolds in the next few days. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.